I read this, I was just like, shit. The body is an archive of emotion.
People are like, oh, you're a graffiti artist. I'm like, no. I'm a visual artist who uses a spray can.
If Africa was a person, it would be Farai.
We're all going through this like really tumultuous experience right now. I think the common denominator universally is like our mental conditioning.
I just want you to give a little bit of advice to young artists that potentially feel like outsiders right now.
The trauma you experienced as like a 10-year-old is sitting somewhere in you. The anger that you harbor from being bullied at high school is still inside of you. The fire to prove everybody wrong that told you you couldn't be that person or do that thing is inside of you. But how you choose to harness that will essentially define your trajectory.
What is your sport? What is your exercise? Do you meditate? How do you sort your head out? You're a very busy man. I actually thought about the other day. I always have these crazy thoughts. I was like, if Africa was a person, it would be Farai.
Yes, I love that.
You're literally like a melting pot of everything. You do so much. The shorter list is, what don't you do?
That is a brilliant question, bro. Well, I'm not in food right now, like culinary or hospitality, and I'm kind of looking at branching into that.
But you do have a coffee cup.
I do have a coffee cup, so I guess I can't say that. Man, what don't I do? I think I make it my job to make sure that there is no like answer to that. You know, I think I really try my best to, one, diversify my interests, and two, make sure that I monetize every interest that I have and every interest that I can pursue. And I think it just kind of comes out in this really authentic and organic way. And I love sharing that with like my audience and people and building more community through that, through like just pursuing interests.
So the way I see you've got this incredible knack of working with brands. And a lot of people have the problem of being very brand narrow in scope. You work with everyone. I mean, I've seen recently you've done a global collab with Diesel, more recently something here with Adidas. I know you work with Puma. You work with a lot of brands. How do you manage that from your perspective?
I think, one, always knowing what you want to bring to the table, which is your visual identity, your creative identity, and your language. And then two, like asking the clear-cut questions to brand and client of like, what do you want from this procedure? Because if we can meet on that, then I can do what I do best, and then I amplify your messaging and vice versa. Instead of it being like, hey, how can I bend and fold to your whim? Because if that's kind of why you want me in the equation, then I'm not going to do it.
So you prefer a brief from the client?
I prefer knowing what the intentions of the campaign are, and then I come in a creative or consultant capacity and either amplify and adjust so we can execute in like a modified way.
Awesome. So you're interpreting their vision and basically running with it with your style.
Exactly.
I like this question. What's the weirdest thing you've ever painted? You've got a painted car. You've got a coffee cup. I saw you doing a fridge just the other day. Maybe it was even yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah.
What is the weirdest thing you've painted?
Oh, bro, that's such a good question.
Full of good questions today.
Yeah. Like, honestly, the weirdest thing, and I think it was weird because it was like surface weirdness, is like the human body. You know what I mean? Like I painted this musician last year or the year before. Her name was Ratty. And I did like a piece on her body, and then she like did the music video like in the work. And it was probably the most like strangest thing that I did, because I was like, this is not my everyday. You know what I mean? Like the fridge, the car, the cup, the bottle, the t-shirt, like I can get around that. That's just normal to me now. But like human skin was probably the strangest one.
I'm surprised you had to think about that one. Let's get back to what helps you wind down. Like, what is your sport? What is your exercise? Do you meditate? How do you sort your head out?
Oh, bro, running. Yeah, I think for me, just having that one-on-one solo time with myself, my thoughts, either first thing in the morning or after a long day, either on the treadmill or just hitting the tarmac, it has to be running. Funny enough, adjacent to that, it's also just painting, being in my studio and allowing my brain to just kind of articulate or go on an adventure of like an idea that I want to create is like the most therapeutic thing to me.
I'm going to jump around a little bit here. So now that you said that, some of your paintings are very bright and bold. Others are a little bit more dark and menacing.
Yeah.
Is that linked to your mental space in that moment or at that time from a creative perspective?
I wouldn't say I think it's a bit of yes and it's a bit of no. I think sometimes the most colorful paintings, in my opinion, can feel the most ominous. I think it's always open to interpretation, right? And that's what I love about my work is that the interpretations are usually quite like endless and can be quite varied in many different ways. But I think as of late, I haven't really been creating from a place of like darkness. I think a lot of my work over the past 2 to 3 years has been really created from like a space of hope and optimism. And that's what I kind of intend on it, or I intend to create it to function as in the world, where it acknowledges that we are feeling certain things, whether it's anxiety, depression, sadness, angst, but there's an optimism for a new day and a new opportunity to turn that around or a new perspective.
So you describe yourself Samurai Farai. That's how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Samurai Engelbrecht is how you believe the world sees you. Is that
Yeah.
has that gap gotten closer, and that's why you're feeling light and a little bit more carefree and hopeful at the moment?
Um, Not really. So Samurai Farai was a creative project that was born in art school, and for me I was always interested in creating a pseudonym that would almost function like a superhero character that like I could project all of my dreams, hopes and aspirations into. And like Farai Engelbrecht was always, in my opinion, somebody who had to explain why he had a Shona first name and a Dutch surname, and why his father was Zimbabwean and his mother was colored. It was always like this thing of I have to explain my identity. And I was like, I don't want to do that. When it comes to my work, and I want to create like this character that I can perform in, who doesn't need to explain themselves in their actions. I think the dynamic or the distance between Farai and Samurai is, yes, the closest it's ever been, because I think my relationship with myself is the healthiest it's ever been. Like Samurai Farai is not like an escapism tactic for me.
Was it?
Definitely, definitely. And I can credit my relationship with sports, with my community, with my rigorous routine and discipline to why now I'm in a healthier place, not just creatively, but physically and mentally and emotionally.
Amazing. So my next question actually you kind of touched on it a bit there was growing up being half Zimbabwean, half Afrikaans.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you caught between, call it two worlds? Did you ever feel like you're getting pulled between things? And how's that shaped you from a sense of belonging?
Definitely pulled, um, but also through like growth, maturation, and adolescence, I've come to, you know, change my perspective on that, because it didn't necessarily at the time it felt like being torn between two cultures, but now I understand that it was essentially being enriched by multiple perspectives, right? And again, it's always down to how you look at something. So now I'm in a position where I can actually look at it as a blessing, where I'm like, wow, I had the opportunity to grow up with a really rich Zimbabwean cultural family that taught me about tradition, that taught me about ancestry, that taught me about rituals and family in a different context. And then I was able to be enriched by like my colored family to learn about food, language, religion, um, and like more informal South African cultural dynamics. And now I'm like a third cultural kid who is like the embodiment of those two things, you know? It's almost like a 1 + 1 = 3 type of thing, where instead of putting all my eggs in one basket, now I'm able to draw from two. And I think being able to draw from those two makes me the person I am today. It makes me special. It makes me unique. It makes me different. It makes me authentic, instead of me feeling like, oh, damn, who am I? Who's this? Who's
It's almost
that?
like a cultural synergy in a way where, but coming back to that, like you said, unique, authentic, different, which
Yeah.
is what we all love as adults.
Yeah.
But as a child, you just want to fit in.
One. Yeah.
You just want to fly under that radar. And, if no one even notices you, even better. Um, how was your childhood? You've said previously that you didn't quite fit in. It all makes sense now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But back then, it must have been extremely difficult. And also, your adolescence, there's not a lot of people to answer questions, the
Yeah.
important questions, or you're probably too scared to ask them.
For sure. I mean, bro, growing up was just absolute turbulence. Um, I lost my father when I was 11 to leukemia. I never really had, after that point, like a stable home or paternal figure or even maternal figure. My relationship with like alcohol and drug abuse started very young. Um, High school was just like an absolute mess. And as a result of all of that instability, there was just extreme search for any escapism, right? Which is just natural and organic. So it wasn't just tough being different, it was tough being damaged as a result of that difference, not just from like a parental kind of angle or cultural angle, but also just like lifing as hard as it could for like a 12-year-old kid and not having, I mean, the emotional tools to cope, whether it was like trying therapy, counseling, medication, it was just gnarly.
I think the problem is, and I said it on one of the other shows the other day, is like I don't believe we're given the tools
Yeah.
to actually go through it. A lot of people either give you therapy or medication, whatever it may be, but it doesn't. I think the root cause is never kind of worked on.
Yeah.
I think we also lived in an era where it was maybe coming from a single parent home as well. It was difficult not having a father figure. I liken it with being divorced with my kids. Like when my boys were with me up until this year, I had to be mom as well when they're
Yeah.
with me. And the thing is, children need that balance, and you can just see the shift in them not gaining that balance. But I mean, looking back, it's everything that's happened to you shaped the person you are. You probably wouldn't
Definitely.
be half the crap. It doesn't make things easier or better,
Yeah.
but literally your circumstances gave the world a gift.
Definitely. But I think at any like hairpin of a moment, things could have gone left. And what's scary for me is like so many of like my friends growing up or my peers, in my life who have kind of gone the opposite route, who have like gone through similar traumas and pain and like turbulence and instability. And I kind of like look at it as a reflection and projection of like an alternate version of myself where I'm like, wow,
That could have been.
could have been me, you know, and it was so close because these are like people who I loved, who I grew up with, I spent every day with, and right now we're we could not be more different, you know, in like every single way. It's
I
weird.
think sometimes it's easier to take the easy escape or the tap out.
Yeah.
Has it affected your relationships with people? Because I think sometimes when you've had that upbringing and past, it's sometimes difficult to find until you meet someone who just gets you.
Yeah.
Because you have said before that your mother's the strongest woman you know.
Yeah.
Um, how's that shaped you? And then how has your relationships up until now been?
Yeah. I mean, my mother is the strongest woman that I know. It doesn't necessarily mean that like we get along or that I always agree with like her decisions and sentiments and things like that. Um, all the women in my life are like inspirationally strong, but I'm also coming to understand now as an adult that I can disagree with their decision making and things that they've kind of chosen to embody outside of that strength. It's also just a learning curve for me. But I think my relationships now with people, and I've been having a lot of this conversation with certain friends, is that I think the bar for me as an individual, for me to consider anybody a friend, is increasing, right? And it's now not determined by, and never has been determined by materialistic things or your status as a human or like what you do as an like occupation. It's really just down to your consistency as a person in whatever you choose to pursue in your life. And if you can meet me with consistency every single day in that pursuit of whatever you choose to, I'm going to rock with you and I'm going to rock with you very hard. The people who have maybe known me for a decade but cannot show me an ounce of consistency, I now in my life I'm saying, listen, I love you, but I can't take you any further with me because everything in my life that I'm achieving and that I'm proud to achieve right now is done through like extreme consistency, like rigorous consistency. And that's all I'm looking for right now. Whether it's in an investment banker or a lawyer or an athlete or an artist or somebody who works in retail, it's just consistency because that adds to my fire because I'm inspired and I'm like, all my friends aren't creatives or athletes. And like, I don't want them to be. I just want them to be consistent, like almost like aggressively consistent in the pursuit of something.
For you, do you think consistency equals safety? When I say that, I'm more talking from a building block. Like that is your reset. That's your bare base. And you're going to build your house either alone or with them
Yeah.
on that consistency.
I think maybe not safety, maybe not even familiarity, but it's just like
Loyalty?
to a degree. The thing is, I don't need you to be loyal to me. It's like I don't know, like other than like my partner, like you'd live your life, but that consistency is more just like it's to me. It's just the trait of a human being that actually wants to achieve something of significance, and maybe that achievement is just like health, you know.
Yeah.
And it's something that's profound that doesn't like necessarily need to mean something to the outside world. It's just you're in pursuit of growth. And to me, that is like,
Huge.
bro, that's gold.
Yeah. I'm going to read this next one because I don't want to mess it up. Because when I read this, I was just like, shit. It hit me pretty hard. You've described the body as an archive of emotion. I'll just repeat that again. The body is an archive of emotion. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
the trauma you experienced as like a 10-year-old is sitting somewhere in you, and the anger that you harbor from being bullied at high school is still inside of you. And even the fire to prove everybody wrong that told you you couldn't be that person or do that thing is inside of you. But how you choose to harness that will essentially define your trajectory, you know? And I think about, like, I'm somebody who struggled with my anger and my emotions for almost my entire life. And I've never found m- more of a outlet of that anger than like sports, like, and not like fighting in sports, just like pure wattage output. Like,
I literally couldn't agree more. I say to people, like, training and looking good is a byproduct of what you do. Like,
yeah,
like you said, your consistency. For me, I train, I exercise to sort my head out. And that's your traumas, your emotions, your anger, your everything. Like, I haven't for a while, but like for me, just a great one's like boxing or any
yeah,
form of martial arts. But just like being alone on the road, being
yeah,
alone in the gym. I always train with AirPods. My preferred way of training often is classes, just
nice.
because I get told what to do. I don't have to think. I
Yeah,
just rock up, I sweat, I do my thing, and I leave kind of
boom.
buzzing.
Yeah,
You chatted about in a previous interview, you chatted about your isolation and anxiety during sort of the COVID period, during the
yeah,
pandemic. I mean, we were all isolated. Did you feel particularly alone during that period?
definitely. My situation was, I think, a bit unique because I was on the cruise ships. I
What were you
had
doing on the cruise
was
ships?
working as an art auctioneer and art associate for a place called Park West Gallery. So I think it was like, what, the 24th, 25th of March, when like the whole world shut down. I was like in like the ports in Tampa, Florida on a massive cruise liner. And long story short, it took me like 150 to 165 days to get brought back home on a ship by water,
Crazy.
living on a vessel, experiencing COVID, like restrictions on a vessel. Certain weeks we were only allowed outside of our like rooms for 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the
It
morning.
was like a floating jail,
No,
basically.
1000%. 7 people actually committed suicide on my vessel during that venture. So yeah, mentally it was the hardest thing that I'd ever experienced, other than losing my dad. And it was just that. It was the act of being thousands of kilometers in open water, alone, away from friends and family, locked in a room on a ship, and just having to literally like figure it out. But it was in that isolation and in that space where I came to kind of get the inspiration to create the visual language that you see now, or to draw inspiration from like what we all feel as people to be like my subject matter. I was like, we're all going through this like really tumultuous experience right now, but I think the common denominator universally is like our mental conditioning, our mental and psychological identity, and our mental and psychological and emotional reactions to hard things. That is like our common denominator. That's what links everybody on this planet, is how we respond emotionally to life, to being here. And then the light bulb went off, and that was essentially what planted the seeds of like the Samurai Farai visual language that you see today and everything.
Did art save you?
1000%. And it has saved me multiple times. It's not just it's a one time art saved my life. Art continues to save me. and will continue to save me down the line. That's why I'm so humbly and profoundly like respectful of the discourse and even of the relationship. If I wasn't known as an artist, I would still be painting just because of what it gives my soul in like a very cliche way, and what it but also now what it's done for my confidence as a person, as a kid who couldn't speak to strangers. Art has given me an identity to feel proud of, and not like in a ostentatious way. It's given me something that's built from vulnerability to be extremely proud of. Not like, hey, I've built this character that's all about bravado and ego. It's like, no, I've built a character that has stemmed from the foundations of honesty, vulnerability, tears, pain, and trauma. And now I can be proud of that. So that's like, to me, profound.
That's so interesting because, like, I've known you probably, I'd say 2 years or so, and you've always come across as one of the most sort of confident, eloquent people I've ever met.
Thank you.
That's why I couldn't wait to have you on the show. So
Thank
to
you.
hear that you came from that very shy, introverted sort of space, but that's probably circumstantial. Doesn't mean you were an introvert. Maybe you were always an extrovert, but you're too scared or shy to do it. I'm not a massive creative. I could pick your art out everywhere. You've got a very specific style for it, and I love it.
Thank you.
Street art crosses into fine art. Is that quite a good way to? Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that there's a lot of arguments in like the fine art world that will say that like graffiti isn't fine art, but then there's conversations in like the graffiti world that say that like graffiti can be anything. For me, I don't call myself a graffiti artist, just I think because of like the semiotics of words. Um, the graffiti writers are the guys who are like hitting walls illegally, like Taps and Chow Mein. Like these are like the OGs of like Johannesburg who are risking like their freedom. I don't do that. To be honest, I don't have the balls for that. I studied fine art and art history in like a very dandyish way and went through the institution. And at a certain point, I wanted to make work so big and so fast that the only way I could do that was with the spray can. So that's what I did. But I'm not kind of contributing to the street culture in that way, in the way that Taps is. I'm doing it in my own way. But when people are like, "Oh, you're a graffiti artist," I'm like, "No, I'm a visual artist who uses a spray can, and I contribute to the culture in my way." We're still figuring that out, but like Taps is a graffiti artist,
Yeah.
and like one of the best that the world has seen. I'm doing my thing, and I'm still figuring out what that is. But if I can also inspire kids who are like riding in the street to monetize that hunger, right? And brand it, then I think I'm doing something good. I think a lot of graffiti writers just want to be seen, but I have a very entrepreneurial mindset where I'm like, let's turn that visibility into currency, because like that's the world we live in right now.
So also under that, street art crosses into fine art. I just wrote something for myself. I said art without borders versus imagination without restraint.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you can take it.
Yeah, I want to keep it.
It's yours.
Say
Well,
that
also,
again. Say
I
that
said
again.
art without borders versus imagination without restraint.
Yo, art without borders versus imagination.
So imagination without restraint pertains to you. It's the way I see it.
Yes. Yeah.
So what is your process once finishing a piece? Like, how do you know it's done?
When I look at a piece, right, the way I judge if it's good or not, one, is if I were to visualize myself seeing it in public and the feeling that I would get. And I had a collector at my house on Sunday, and we were just discussing the F&B art fair and like our experience of it, blah, blah, blah. And my initial thoughts when I look at anything that I create to consider if it's done, it should be, holy shit, that is a brave work of art. Or I can identify the courage in that piece. It might not even need to be finished in like a traditional sense of the word. It's just the energy that the piece needs to emanate to me needs to be like bravery, courage. Like you dared to do something that you were afraid to. And that's how I look at everybody's work, whether you are William Kentridge or somebody who's in their fourth year at TUT or Wits Art School. I look to see if you're like doing something that you're afraid of, or if you're just doing what's comfortable to you that you know that you're good at and that you'll get like a little applause for. So for me, as soon as I can identify that the work has like been imbued with strength and courage, I'm like, cool, that's that. Move on. But I look at work in a very different way, I think, to other artists because I'm always thinking like, how can I give this thing a longer life? How do I take what I've done on a canvas or a paper, um, dilute it maybe into a different medium, and then create access of this piece to 50,000 people outside of social media? And I don't know another artist that does that like independently. Maybe a brand will be like, hey, we like this, do this for us. And then we're going to put it on, I don't know, a bunch of caps that we're going to put in all our stores nationwide. Then you have a reason to dilute and give that work a longer life. But I do it like that's one of the pillars of my business. It's like merchandise. To me, it is like, well, if somebody can't afford a 50 or 60,000 rand artwork, what can they afford? Somebody can definitely afford a 400 rand t-shirt who actually wants to be involved in my story, in my universe, and support me and even be proud of that purchase. So why don't we keep doing t-shirts? And now as a result, I think in the past 3 years, I've sold 1,000 t-shirts a year.
Amazing.
Which is, I'm not even like a retailer. You know what I mean?
You need a Shopify account.
Yeah, bro, that's there.
I see a gap.
Yeah.
Coming back to you said about the creative, or for me, it's the creative process. You said about being brave and all the rest. I think what you see in a finished artwork is really what we want to get out of this podcast as well, where we can watch the episode as myself and Maylene and go, shit, that was good.
Yeah.
We can just watch that over and over, not because it's ours or that we produce it or host it or anything like that. We believe we're really making a difference creatively. With the recipients of your art, someone who buys it or someone just standing in front of it at a gallery, what do you think they observe? I know it's very up to their interpretation.
Yeah.
But what do you think they see when they see it?
I think that first impression of my work, I can imagine if I were to objectively speak on it, you would probably feel some sort of sentiments towards like an Africanized homage or tradition meeting like a very contemporary Picasso Basquiat-esque approach to like line, color, and form. And you'd, depending on like your taste, you'd either be captivated or repulsed. And I think that's the only two factory
No
settings.
middle ground.
Yeah, factory settings I have is like people are like, oh, this is lame. I've seen like this is just like a Picasso-esque Basquiat nonsense. Or somebody's like, wow, this is strikingly beautiful. Where's the artist? I'd love to know more. Sometimes I do have conversations with people and they're like, this feels like it has to do with emotion. This feels like it has to do with how I'm feeling or how this character is feeling. And then I'm like, yes, that was my intention. But if it's not what you take away from it, that's also okay. Um, I think what I really love about what I do is that it's always creating conversation. There's always something to talk about. And sometimes somebody reveals something in an artwork that I didn't see or that I didn't even consider. That's what I really, really love, because that's why I think you have to constantly put your work out into the public, is so that you can learn more about it from it, like fresh eyes, fresh cultures, fresh perspectives, fresh identities. But yeah, I would hope that when somebody sees my work without any context, that they just see somebody kind of creating something new to represent Africa.
When I look at it, and I mean, I'm no expert, but when I look at it, I see a motive, number one.
Dope.
I naturally think this is African because I kind of see almost like an Ndebele type.
Yes.
It's the colors
Yes.
and then the Picasso edge. So it's almost those three. And then I look way too long. Like I'm trying to understand it or think.
Yeah.
But I think everyone's take on it's going to be vastly different.
Yeah.
But then I think what makes it super cool on top of it, if a lot of people didn't see you doing it, they wouldn't know it was with a can as well.
Yeah.
To the naked eye.
Yeah.
It's just finished really, really well. You don't see any overspray, stuff like that. So it's done incredibly well. So I think a lot of people, not only the artwork, they're bound to your story. And I think that's very important. So talking about stories, I just want you to give a little bit of advice to young artists that potentially feel like outsiders right now.
Sure.
The school you, the one that was bullied, felt alone, but
Yeah.
just is, living in Africa, we've got so many phenomenal artists, creatives, athletes, politicians, whatever, but the world will probably never see them.
Yeah.
How do you break, I wouldn't call it the poverty cycle. I'm not talking about your life, but living in the country, dude, there's a lot of people in a poverty cycle, probably with huge amounts of creative ability. What do you tell that kid at school, the aspiring artist? What to do? What's next?
I think the best advice I can give, and this is like, I think even coming out of like Comic-Con, which was like last week, I had like this revelation, which I think simplifies what I'm about to say, right? Lean into what makes you weird. Like, lean into it so hard that there is no other space for anything that makes you normal. Because when you lean into that, which is your unique interests, your unique talents, one, you give other people the permission to do the same. Two, you find the people who are leaning into their weirdness. And three, you show the world that you aren't afraid to be who you are. And in my opinion, that is the only way you separate yourself from the flock, because there will always be people who are more talented than you. There will always be people who are harder working than you. There will always be people who have more baggage or trauma or some sort of like story that is like deeper than you. But there's only one you, right? And the harder you lean into your uniqueness, the further away you show the world and even yourself who you are. So stop trying to be like everybody else. If I felt some type of way, which I did, about being an artist and creative who loved to train and to run and to lift weights, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't be running marathons or doing like hybrid races and doing like sports campaigns and designing things for like sports companies, and I would have just like cut myself off from that reality. And then if I was a sportsman who like never leaned into my creative bone, I'd never be Samurai Farai. But now I've showed the world that you can have a creative taste and pursuit and you can have one in sports, and they can go hand in hand, and you can create that life. But I'm so excited for like what other, like what kids are gonna do and create once they lean into their interests. What other like quirky combinations can you tie in as an individual? Like, what's next?
So lean into your weirdness.
Lean,
Lean hard.
lean
So
45 degrees.
you are a young man still. You've achieved a lot. I know you're saying no one works harder than you.
Yeah.
That's a Sivangesi line. He's coming at you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But at the moment, like I see what you're doing. I don't think you're wrong there, and it's good. I love the confidence. I love your work ethic. I love
Thank
everything
you.
that you do. Being young and ambitious and just killing it with everything you do, to be honest. What's next? What are you planning to do next? Or are you going to keep pushing ahead? What are you going to expand into? Can you give us some sort of insights?
You. Such a good question. I ask myself that every day. I think, before I answer your question, I think what's next sometimes just has to be like what's present, right? Um,
You're very happy with the present right now, aren't you?
I'm over the moon with the
You're at
present.
peace.
Yes, but in that peace, there is hunger,
Mm.
constant bubbling. But I think before I like answer your question about what I'm doing next, I think that as individuals, we need to dig where our feet are, and that the current moment sometimes just like is already what is important. This is important. The day that I'm about to have is important. Not necessarily always like the trajectory and the process of moving forward, but like how far we have moved forward to this present moment. I think that just creates like a sense of happiness and joy and like stability and grounding, instead of always feeling like I'm inadequate, I'm not enough, I need to do more, I'm inadequate, I'm inferior. Because that loop is really ugly.
Yeah.
Which I'm always wary of. But things that I am getting into as a artist, sports person, creative, um, furthering my automobile relationship with Cherry, a trip to China with them, potentially paint some cars over there. I want to do me and the team are talking about a run from Johannesburg to Durban for mental health awareness. I'm doing a project with the Ricky Rick Foundation and Santon City to raise money for mental health awareness now in October, something that's incredibly important to me. I don't really want to show any more paintings or work in South Africa. So my main focus right now is showing work overseas. So I'm going back to America in about 6 or 7 months to kind of cement representation that side and some gallery shows. And all the while just building and uplifting not just myself, but my community, my audience, and the people who I have the privilege of inspiring.
It's amazing. So, Farai, thank you very much for joining us in the Blue Room. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we can't wait to see the rest of your journey.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. This has been fantastic.
Pleasure. You do so much. The shorter list is, what don't you do?